Let's find a point. Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid. It's just a ride, and we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Why are we here?
I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. The big electron. The big electron. It doesn't punish, doesn't reward. It doesn't judge at all. It just is, and so are we. For a little while.
Greetings, programs. It's Sunday the 15th, 2017. Welcome to Red Pill Sunday School here on UCY.TV. Thanks for joining me this week. I'll tell you what, I wanted to sort of continue on a couple of threads that I've hit in the last couple of shows. One of those being the whole Las Vegas shooting thing, but more so the notion of how the law applies to this. What is the purpose? Who benefits? Q bono. Right? Who benefits from this type of what we identified last week as a blood sports, blood sacrifice, or public executions in peacetime? What is the real purpose? And specifically in this case, we usually hear gun control as the main focus, but in this case we have a little thing going on in the background that needs to be discussed, and I'd like to. First, I want to play you a clip. This is by Truth Stream Media, whom I appreciate much of their contributions to the Internet of Things, the YouTube special that it's become. I want to play this clip just because it goes over some of the facts revolving around this notion of who benefits and what was the specific purpose, or what's the specific goal in mind for this particular public display of violence, of blood, be it real or not, be it a false flag or a real event. Again, in my opinion, doesn't matter, because of course, as you'll hear in this particular clip, you've got the classic "never let a good crisis go to waste." You'll hear that quoted in this particular video, but let's play it so that we can get an idea, first of all, of what it is that this is going to lead to, which is, of course, more protection and security for us all in the name of body scanners. Now, after the video clip, I'm going to go into some U.S. code that explains that it is perfectly legal to irradiate the hell out of you, according to U.S. code. And also, we'll talk about the biological weapons part of the U.S. code, which is active and very active on the American people. And finally, we will, or maybe even before that, we will speak of the quotes that I've collected and actually tried to hand out at the airport on what we call the National Opt-Out Day, where groups across the world, in fact, tried to go to airports and hand out information or try to get people not to go into these backscatter body scanners, these as they call naked body scanners, which is the least of your worries, trust me. The fact that you're able to see some private parts, trust me when I say that's the least of your worries. We'll read some quotes from the scientific community on radiation in particular, but specifically geared towards the backscatter machines. Oh, and then this shall be fun. Let's play the clip here. Now, remembering the question here, who benefits? Who benefits?
The more we began asking ourselves, qui bono? Who benefits? Was there anyone waiting in the wings who benefits from such a senseless event? And as sick as it seems to say that, unfortunately, we live in a country and now a globally connected society that has been run on false flag terror and the Hegelian dialectic since at the very least World War II. At least. We have people in leadership positions like Rahm Emanuel saying things like, never let a good crisis go to waste.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
So when you see a bunch of red flag details start coming out that don't make any sense, and I mean no sense at all, and you start asking yourself, could this be a false flag? Always ask qui bono, and then work backwards from there. And he comes back and says, it's called the High Incident Project. They want to make the American public think that places with extremely high security, like Las Vegas, aren't safe. They're trying to create more regulations. You will see laws proposed in the next few years to put up more metal detectors and other security devices. Media and politicians will be saying places with lots of police need even more police. I can't guarantee anything will happen tomorrow, but Las Vegas is on their minds. Then he comes back one last time and says, if their plan is successful, State of Nevada will pass a law in the future making all casinos have mandatory metal detectors and backscatter machines. Soon after, a federal law will be passed to put these machines in universities, high schools, federal buildings, you name it. OSI Systems and Chertoff are the main producers of these machines. Sometime around 2020, Chertoff and OSI will merge into a single company. After they merge, the owners will sell off all their stock and make billions in profit. Mr. Chertoff has been in contact with Sheldon Adelson. Mr. Adelson will become a huge sponsor of these machines, and he will be the first to put them in his casinos when the law passes. This is my last message for now. Don't expect me to return anytime soon. If you will recall, back when the underwear bomber happened, Chertoff, who had been Department of Homeland Security Secretary from 2005 to 2009, by then he was running the Chertoff Group, which is a private security consulting agency. And after the underwear bomber happened, he came out and was a really big proponent, publicly promoting the Rapiscan naked body scanners, the backscatter x-ray machines that they put into all of the airports. He was pushing all of that, and then it came out that one of his main clients was OSI. OSI owns Rapiscan, the maker of the machines. OSI, by the way, being run by Deepak Chopra, not Oprah's Chopra, another guy with the same name, who is considered a quote-unquote significant donor to the Democratic Party to the point that he was able to accompany President Obama on a trip to India in 2010 to promote trade between India and the U.S. That's the level that guy is. So you have a lot of big players involved in OSI, Rapiscan, of course, the Chertoff Group. On top of that, James Murin, the CEO of MGM International, which owns the Mandalay Bay Casino, also just so happens to be a sitting member of the Department of Homeland Security's National Infrastructure Advisory Council. And he actually sits on a group called the Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience Research and Development Working Group, and they write reports like this one, where they talk about things that they can do to help get legislation passed and regulations to put in security technology infrastructure, such as, X-ray backscatter machines, into places, how to make that affordable for shareholders, which would be the people who own casinos who would have to buy and purchase these machines, and also they consider things like public acceptance of such technologies. That's the kind of stuff they talk about in their meetings as a member of the Homeland Security National Infrastructure Advisory Council just so happens to be the same guy who is the CEO of the company that owns the hotel where this happened.
So all this was predicted, and it's eerie, and what makes sense about it is the president has these people as his peers. He's got a tower over there on Vegas Strip. He's met with these people publicly and privately. He knows all these casino owners. And Sheldon Adelson in particular sponsored the Las Vegas debate in the last GOP debate cycle. The day before the debate, Trump met with Adelson at his hotel where the debate was being held, met privately with most, if not all, of the candidates on stage as they basically begged for his money and backing as one of the biggest kingmakers in the Republican Party. And Trump also met with them, and that night at the debate, and while we don't know exactly what they said, that night at the debate, all the candidates hopped to see who could be the biggest and boldest at talking about counter-security measures, how they would take on terrorism, whether or not they would launch new wars to defend the country, and other related matters. And Trump came out very strongly that night for an anti-terrorism administration that picks up right where George Bush left off. And you've got Sheldon Adelson quietly, with his cloaked hands, glad that they took this script. So the fact that you're now seeing a possible false flag incident and new security measures starting on the Las Vegas Strip pretty much echoes what happened in the debate and the connections that are there.
What's even, I think, creepier about it is after a mass shooting in this country, you always have calls for gun control. We're seeing that, but not to the same degree we normally do. Actually, what we're seeing this time is a lot of talk in every mainstream news outlet about how vulnerable hotel security is everywhere. So here's one from the New York Times about the Las Vegas shooting underscores hotel security choices. Here's one from Fox News about how hotels take new look at security after Las Vegas, but will customers sacrifice their privacy? And it just goes on and on. And every single one of these articles, they quote the same guy. It's this guy, Jim Stover, and he says, the hospitality industry hasn't gotten its act together in terms of anti-terrorism. It's not going to be pushed. It has to be pulled. It's not going to be pushed. It has to be pulled. All over the place, they're saying this. You even had an op-ed in the Huffington Post where a lady straight up said, do U.S. hotels need metal detectors? And it shows a picture of the backscatter x-rays, the naked body scanners. And she goes through and makes this argument, and it's a terrible argument. She says things like, metal detectors and security screening are routine at the entrances to hotels in many countries, such as Egypt and Jordan. Yes, because we need to start setting our sights on making America more like the Middle East, right? But it only takes 30 seconds longer than walking through a revolving door. And we all adjusted to the security screenings at U.S. airports, although we may grumble from time to time if the lines are long and we're racing to catch a plane. But TSA security screenings have become part of the experience of flying in the U.S., so we might as well accept this too. That's what she's saying. Perhaps it's time to make it safer to stay at a hotel in the U.S. by installing metal detectors and x-ray machines in hotel lobbies. But just like with the airports, it's not going to stop there. In fact, the controversy over backscatter machines went up a notch when people started questioning the health and safety of such machines, and they ended up having to take a bunch of them out of the airports. And those machines are just sitting around waiting for someone to use them. So why not get all the hotels and casinos on board to stick them right in? And what do you know? But just the very next day, they're now reporting in Bloomberg that guests at the Wynn are being scanned in a glimpse of Las Vegas's future. That is how fast this has already begun. Do you want to know how blatantly, transparently obvious this agenda is? The next day, former Homeland Security official Chad Sweet, who just so happens to also be the co-founder and CEO of the Chertoff Group, went on CNBC, and not only did he say that in a free society, there are no ways to eliminate security risks.
In a free society, there's no way to eliminate this kind of risk.
So what he really means is we need to be less free if we want to be safe. We need to give up our liberty for temporary security. He was also pushing, guess what?
But there are ways, as you said, to potentially mitigate the risk. In addition to intelligence sharing, You can also do a number of steps to establish a secure perimeter using various types of screening technology.
That's right, the X-ray technologies. Already, not even 24 hours later. So I guess the guy in the 4chan group just so happens to have had a crystal ball. That is what I call eerily prescient.
I guess some people don't remember. I remember it like it's yesterday. This is all the stuff they were building up to. They were telling us Homeland Security was going to be pre-screening passengers, every train, every plane, and eventually every car as well. They had mobile X-ray scanners deployed in the streets. They've got extremely sophisticated, potentially dangerous, very expensive equipment being rolled out everywhere, but the public was fed up with it. Hence, the Obama administration focused on the gun control side of the issue for years. Now that the administrations are back to Republican, here we go again with all these security measures, and better look closely at what's happening. Not everything is what it appears to be.
Hey, maybe Trump will be the first one to put it in at his hotel. Why not? Because this is what they're getting ready. They're already pushing. It's been literally a day, and they are already scanning people. They're already doing this. And like the poster said, this is just going to be the beginning. Because to get us to the fully automated Minority Report level of society that we're supposed to be living in the future, there's going to have to be backscatter machines and all kinds of technology everywhere. That's the only way to get us there. But they know that they can't just institute it and put it in. They have to socially engineer everybody to accept it. And one way they can do that is false flag terror. That is how they get people to accept more and more intrusion and encroachment on their privacy and on their person. And that is why every time one of these events happens, you have to ask, who stands to benefit? And there are some people in some very high places who stand to make an awful lot of money off of taking away a little bit more of our freedom.
Okay, so obviously there's some behind-the-scenes things going on revolving around this incident, this public execution in peacetime, this false flag event. Now, and the players are set up. You can see all the correlations. Good presentation by Truth Stream Media there on YouTube. But what I want to talk to you about is, she mentioned that these things cause cancer, and indeed they disrupt the DNA of each man who steps into the apparatus. In fact, my personal opinion is that they're sterilizing people slowly and over time through these machines as well. Just one more piece of the depopulation puzzle, as we discussed last week. Perfect sinister plan, if you ask me. Regardless, the health dangers have been acknowledged in other countries. Often other countries will not allow what the United States allows in quote-unquote protection of its people, for anything from chemicals to biologicals to, well, radiation machines. Now, I'm going to play a little clip from my documentary that goes over the U.S. Code, specifically the U.S. Biological Weapons Program, which is very active in peacetime. Lots of experiments have come out. The president has apologized. At least the previous president has apologized for many of the incidents that have happened. The known poisoning, the known toxic spread of chemicals to test biological weapons on the population. We've even done it in Canada. It was revealed not too long ago that we were testing biological weapons on the Canadian people. Now, why this doesn't, again, bring outrage, I don't know. The things I've pointed out on my shows and in my documentaries and on my blog are, they're a reason for just absolute quitting this whole thing. It's ridiculous what is allowed by this government for itself. In other words, it approves its own laws. It pretends to have laws and then says, well, the exception to that law is this. And every law it has an exception, including, by the way, the national emergency. The Declaration of National Emergency essentially it suspends the Constitution, suspends the law, suspends anything because it's done out of necessity, and there's a war declared against the emergency. Wartime knows no law. I'm sorry to tell you, whether you believe that it does or not, it doesn't. There are certain Geneva protections that may or may not be followed, but I mean, the mass destruction of war, again, as we read last week, is a depopulation method. There's nothing lawful about that. So the laws that would actually control such an event as war, i.e. depopulation, what do you expect those laws to be? I mean, you can't be stupid enough to actually think there's some moral justice code when it comes to the depopulation efforts of war. Or, for that matter, of peacetime things that we experience on a daily basis, such as what we're talking about today. Now, I'm going to read to you back in the day when I did the National Opt-Out Day and was forced out of the airport because, well, I won't get into that, but the videos I have are priceless because, of course, I have the head of the police at the airport stating very clearly that that free speech is not absolute, that I would need a permit for free speech if I wanted to hand out advertising, which I was not. I was handing out information, and I want to read that information to you. You can go to my blog at realityblogger.wordpress.com, and you can search for the National Opt-Out Day and another one, the National Opt-Out Day, the most important story you missed. And I want to read this to you because the Microsoft Word document and a PDF document is there for you to download with all this information I'm going to read to you. Because I think it's very important. If they're talking about putting these things in hotels and everywhere else, schools especially, for little children who are still growing to pop their DNA out of place and cause these eventual cancers. So the problem is, as with vaccines, the reason why people don't connect diseases with vaccines is because they happen years after the incident, after the exposure. That's why they used to call the weaponized vaccine programs as a slow virus, something that affects you much later. And so they'll blame things, such as radiation or whatever, on the cancers that vaccines cause, not realizing that those cancer cells have been sitting there for years, decades, 50 years. Prions will sit for 50 years without... in hibernation. Well, hibernation's not the right word, but you get the idea. Before they awaken from such things as ultrasound and start infecting other proteins and causing such things as Alzheimer's. Are these things stopping terrorism? We'll define terrorism again in a minute. Thousands of illegal immigrants come across the southern border of the United States, unchallenged, unscanned, backscattered, right? No metal detectors there. While an honest American essentially cannot go about his own country without being subjugated to an illegal search and seizure at the airport. I get him molested by the TSA agents for declaring their rights to opt out, right? So in other words, now keep in mind, since they put in these backscatter machines, I've never been through one. I've been flying at least 24 times. Both ways, both airports, I've never, ever subjected myself to one of these machines. I want you to understand that. There's one time where I decided not to just opt out, but to say no on both accounts, and I ended up in handcuffs, and that story is on my website. So something about being molested by the TSA. It's actually quite a read. Essentially, I said to the woman who put me in handcuffs, who was a sheriff, that if you city police officer, if you continue in this course, acting in purely the color of law, you're pretending to have the authority to do this, then I'm going to come after you. I'm not seeing your uniform. You're acting past any authority granted to you, and therefore I'm going to sue you. I'm going to make you lose your job and your pension. I'm coming after you. I'm not coming after your police department. That would be useless. I'm coming after you. I don't see your fucking uniform, you bitch. Get me out of these handcuffs or you're going to be in serious trouble. And guess what? Her partner overheard and said, yeah, you better do what he says. And she let me go after about 20 minutes in handcuffs. That was the only time, man. There's a lot of guys out there, your Mark Stevens, etc., that invite you to go get arrested and say, look, I've been to jail 10 times. Follow me. No. Bad idea. Bad freaking idea. You don't follow someone who continuously goes to jail because they're doing the wrong thing. I don't want you to follow me either, but I do want you to learn what color of law is, what the FBI even recognizes as color of law or color of office, because it recognizes it as a fraud. And why more people don't use that particular aspect when they're confronted with police and other officers of the law, which don't exist, in reality, I don't know. But all of them are acting under the color of office, color of law, pretending to have authority that they don't. And so, anyway, you can read about that separately. So let's talk about all of these the facts about the whole body scanners, the whole body imager devices, as they call them, or the backscatter machines. Because what we want to know is, are they safe? That's really all I'm interested in. Are they safe, and is privacy actually being violated by taking, the ability? Do they have the ability, and do they always take quote-unquote naked pictures of your body? And the answer is yes, and the answer to being safe is an absolute no. So I want to read some of these quotes to you, and then we'll move on to the U.S. Code that says, hey, that's okay because we have the right to be irradiated and poisoned and killed. That's what citizenship is, you fools. So let's go into this here. Is it stopping terrorism? Obviously not. The borders are open like they've never been. Is it photographing and storing your naked photos? Now, that seems to be what bothers people, which to me is laughable, but okay, let's ask the experts just to clarify whether that's actually happening. All right, so is it photographing and storing your naked photos? Cheryl Johnson, Office of Transport Security Manager, says that, quote, it will show the private parts of people, but what we've decided is that we're not going to blur those out because it severely limits the detection capabilities. It is possible to see genitals and breasts while they're going through the machine. Unquote. And that would include your children, of course. I'm sure they have nice collections of photos. How about Epic Executive Director Mark Rodenberg in an interview with CNET? He says, quote, these devices are designed and deployed in a way that allows the images to be routinely stored and recorded, which is exactly what the Marshals Service is doing. We think it's significant. William Bordley, Associate General Counsel with the Marshals Service, says that approximately 35,314 images have been stored on the Bridgette Gen 2 machine. Let's see. Procurement specification for whole body imager devices for checkpoint operations. A report by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the TSA states that in a 70-page document showing the TSA's procurement specification is classified as, quote, sensitive security information, and it says that in some modes the scanner must, quote, allow exporting of image data in real time, unquote, which means it's floating through the internet. In other words, it's in the cloud, and provide a mechanism for, quote, high-speed transfer of image data, unquote, over the network. It also says that image filters will protect, quote, protect the identity, modesty, and privacy of the passenger. TSA spokesman Sari Koshetz lied, actually, open-faced, to CNET, stating that the agency's scanners are delivered to airports with the image recording functions turned off. She says, quote, we're not recording them. Honest. I'm reiterating that to the public. We are not ever activating those capabilities at the airport. Well, honey, you just got proved to be lying by the Homeland Security and the the Marshal's office. So thank you very much. This is why you don't listen to spokespeople. And you especially shouldn't have a spokesmodel for a president, Mr. Reagan. You remember when Reagan was in those commercials saying that I smoke these cigarettes because my doctor tells me they're safe? You should too, and your family, and your children. I'm a spokesmodel. Elect me president. Real brilliant. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty here. Can these scanners cause cancer? Now, remember, we're talking about radiation. Imagine, if you will, the time where you've been in a doctor's office or seen it, where they put on a big lead shielding vest onto your parts that aren't being scanned. And they also will go out of the room, close the door, put on protection to avoid the X-ray scans, and that's just for an X-ray. All right, now these backscatter machines are a little bit different because again they do attack literally and scatter the DNA, altering it. Let's read some of these quotes. Boyan Alexandrov, Center for Nonlinear Studies in Los Angeles Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico states some studies reported significant genetic damage, while others, although similar, showed none. So some of the studies they did on the backscatter machines showed significant damage to the genetic, in other words, your DNA, your epigenome, etc., and some showed none. Who do we trust? Same place says that although the forces generated from these scanners are tiny, resonant effects allow THZ waves, I think that's terahertz waves, to unzip double-stranded DNA, creating bubbles in the double strand that can significantly interfere with the processes such as gene expression and DNA replication. Translation, it destroys your DNA. And this is what they want to put in, eventually, in all offices, in schools for your children. Hi, children, welcome to school. Before you go learn, let's unzip your DNA. Dr. John Goffman, Professor Emeritus of Molecular and Cell Biology at the University of California, Berkeley. He states that, quote, any X-ray photon may be the one which sets off in motion the high-speed, high-energy electron which causes a carcinogenic or atherogenic or smooth muscle mutation. Such mutations rarely disappear. The higher their accumulated number in a population, the higher will be the population's mortality rates from radiation-induced cancer and ischemic heart disease. Let me say that again. The higher their accumulated number in a population, the higher will be the population's mortality rates from radiation-induced cancer and ischemic heart disease. Now imagine these businessmen that are going almost, 2-3 times a week to fly somewhere, going through these body scanners, getting what he's saying is an accumulated number, an accumulation of this, and also the more people, so the accumulated number in the population. So in other words, the more people that travel through, the higher the cancer rates are going to be. However, so many things are blamed, on causing cancer that how could you possibly differentiate? Well, these guys are telling you that any X-ray photon may be the one with such in motion, okay? In other words, there is no safe radiation, and we're going to cover that as well. Dr. John Goffman, again, says Goffman's studies indicate that radiation from medical diagnosis and treatment is a causal cofactor in 50% of America's cancers. and 60% of our ischemic or blood flow blockage heart disease. He stresses that the frequency with which Americans are medically x-rayed, quote, makes for a significant radiological impact. Well, what do you think is happening when you go through these backscatter machines? Go to Dr. David Brenner, head of Columbia University Center for Radiological Research. He says children and passengers with gene mutations, around 1 in 20 of the population, are more at risk as they are less able to repair X-ray damage to their DNA. The most likely risk from the airport scanners is a common type of skin cancer called basal cell carcinoma. Now, I can't help but wonder if you combine, which, there's a class action lawsuits going on with Cialis and Viagra and all those hard-on pills, as they call them, which are causes of radiation, skin cancer, carcinoma, skin cancer. So I'm wondering if you take Viagra and go through a scanner, if you're not getting sort of a double dose or an activation of the chemical byproducts that are stuck in your system, and it's causing, this type of cancer. That would actually make a lot of sense. The correlation. Let's see. Let's go to, again, Dr. David Brenner. He says, if all 800 million people who use airports every year were screened with X-rays, then the very small individual risk multiplied by the large number of screened people might imply a potential public health or societal risk. The population risk has the potential to be significant. If there are increases in cancers as a result of irradiation of children, they would most likely appear some decades in the future. It would be prudent not to scan the head and neck. Remember, these are full body scanners. There really is no other technology around where we're planning to X-ray such an enormous number of individuals. It's really unprecedented in the radiation world. Dr. Michael Love, Department of Biophysics and Physical Chemistry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, says that, quote, they say the risk is minimal, but statistically someone is going to get skin cancer from these X-rays. No exposure to X-ray is considered beneficial. No exposure to X-ray is considered beneficial. We know X-rays are hazardous, but we have a situation at the airports where people are so eager to fly that they will risk their lives in this manner. John Sadat, biochemist, University of California, San Francisco, says, quote, while the dose would be safe if it were distributed throughout the volume of the entire body, the dose to the skin may be dangerously high. Why does he say that? He says we still don't know the beam intensity or other details of their classified systems. Why is it classified? Well, because, Chertoff, he's part of government. He can make it classified. Just has to ask a few favors. So what they're saying is, why is this taking an X-ray of the skin and not the bones? Because it specifically focuses on the skin. This is why skin cancers, which are deadly, are becoming more prevalent. Dr. Douglas Boreham, professor in medical physics and applied radiation sciences at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Collectively, he says, the radiation doses from the scanners incrementally increase the risk of fatal cancers among the thousands or millions of travelers who will be exposed. Some radiations experts believe. We don't have enough information to make a decision on whether there's going to be a biological effect or not. But what did government say? Oh, they're safe. They're safe. No worries. Don't worry. The company that made them did all the testing. You can trust Chertoff. The thing that worries me the most, says Peter Rez of Arizona State University, is not what happens if the machine works as advertised, but what happens if it doesn't. In other words, what if somehow, say, the cleaner, who's just one grade below the TSA worker, happens to turn the wrong knob, or, I don't know, it comes out of the factory with a little higher setting than is supposed to, and what if it just is frying people, or what if that's what it's supposed to do, which is my personal opinion. I'm an alarmist. What can I say? Let's see. National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements from a 2002 report that studied these security devices, these backscatter machines, says, quote, "We cannot exclude the possibility of a fatal cancer attributable to radiation in a very large population of people exposed to very low doses of radiation." Well, that's a nice way of saying you're all fucked. But I have to go on vacation. I have the right to travel. I must go here to do business. Oh, I must go visit grandma and the kids. Oh, I must do this, and therefore I'll have cancer, please. Can I have a side of cancer with my chicken or steak, please? Chicken or beef, I should say. Isn't that the choice? Technology Review article, arxiv.org. Quote, "Based on our results, we argue that a specific terahertz radiation exposure may significantly affect the natural dynamics of DNA and thereby influence intricate molecular processes involved in gene expression and DNA replication." Okay, folks, in other words, with all these quotes together, millimeter wave scanning devices may damage your DNA, i.e. cause cancerous growth or gene expressions for other diseases, or who knows what else? Who knows what the hell else? Can they even? I wonder. You got to wonder if they can even predict what these things are going to do, how they're going to change. So what I want to do now is I want to play you an excerpt. I'll be quoting myself today. I'll be playing my own voice out of my own documentary called Lethal Injection, The Story of Vaccination. If you haven't seen that, it's free on YouTube. It's got over, I'm proud to say, because I said, hey, take this, share it, it's free. You need to know this. Please reproduce it, put it out there. On YouTube, it's got over 250,000 hits with all the different copies and times it's been shared. It's been sold by a couple of different outlets that I said could sell them for $1 or $2. I'm not making anything from that. Never have, never will. I recommend that you watch it. It is, again, free on YouTube. It's been called, and I'll take it. It's been called the best vaccine documentary out there because it really goes into it. And, of course, I want to make another one. I'm ready and poised to make another vaccine documentary. And if I just had just a little bit of funding, oh, my God, what I could do and try to get this thing in at least in some kind of film festival or get some kind of exposure to it. But, by God, the information between myself and Patrick Jordan and our listeners and our helpers, oh, my God. We know what this thing is. It is a biological weapon. That is what vaccines were always intended to be. Just as war is intended to be depopulation, so is vaccination. It is a biological weapon. It's listed so in government documents, for God's sake. And the history of it is just ridiculous, which is what I call it. That's why I call it the history or the story of vaccination. Lethal injection. Take the name seriously. Now I'm gonna play a clip, an excerpt, because this is the kind of information that's in there. It's not just wild speculation. It's actually reading from U.S. Code to tell you what the law is regarding the United States' capability of harming you in every way possible, from biological weapons to radiation machines. And the reason I'm playing this today even though the first part is about, is about the biological weapons program specifically, part of that is radiological dispersion devices. You think that's just a nuclear bomb? You're sadly mistaken. These are radiation-emitting devices. They're called body scanners or backscatter machines. And I want you to listen to what the law is. When you are either government or contracted to government, you have the right to harm or kill people with radiation. There's no law that says that these guys have to fix or alter or change these things just because these consensus of scientists have come out and said it will cause skin cancer or alter your DNA or kill you. No, they're not going to do anything because they don't have to. It's the right of the people who are the citizens of the United States to be harmed, killed, maimed. You just won't believe. This is, okay, listen to this, folks. This is right out of U.S. Code. This is called the Biological Weapons Program, which is active. It is active. Do you understand that? Listen to this, folks. This is why it is perfectly legal to have these radiation machines and give you cancer, and why you have no recourse to do anything about it, and why ultimately you have no recourse to do anything about vaccines or any other biological weapon that's put upon you. Listen up.
Now, shockingly, this isn't the only time that we can see in the U.S. Code where the government feels it has the right to poison, irradiate, and use humans as test subjects. Let's take a look at some of these in the U.S. Code. Let's look at Title 50, Chapter 32. Listed as the Chemical and Biological Warfare Program, we go to Section 1520A, where the government lists restrictions on use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. Part A reads, Prohibited Activities. The Secretary of Defense may not conduct, directly or by contract, 1. Any test or experiment involving the use of a chemical agent or biological agent on a civilian population, or 2. Any other testing of a chemical agent or biological agent on human subjects. Well, that certainly sounds like a good thing until we read Part B. Under exceptions, it states, subject to subsections C, D, and E of this section, the prohibition in subsection A of this section does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes. 1. Any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity. Remember, we're talking about humans like you and me here. 2. Any purpose that is directly related to protection against toxic chemicals or biological weapons and agents. And 3. Any law enforcement purpose, including any purpose related to riot control. Under Part C, it states, informed consent required, and this is very important. The Secretary of Defense may conduct a test or experiment described in subsection B of this section only if informed consent to the testing was obtained from each human subject in advance of the testing on that subject. Now, it is important to note here that your consent is always assumed in all of these experiments. The only way to protest this type of treatment, irradiation, and chemical exposure by your government is to verbally and in writing not consent. Again, consent is always assumed. And because you are fooled into voting for representatives, your consent is granted by Congress. Under Part D, prior notice to Congress, not later than 30 days after the date of final approval within the Department of Defense of plans for any experiment to study or be conducted by the Department of Defense, whether directly or under contract, involving the use of human subjects for the testing of a chemical agent or biological agent, the Secretary of Defense shall submit to the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives a report stating forth a full accounting of those plans, and the experiment or study may then be conducted only after the end of the 30-day period, beginning on the date such report is received by those committees. Again, your consent to be tested on is being granted by your congressmen and your senators, and generally with the full knowledge and comprehension of the governor of your state. In Part E, the U.S. Code actually defines what a biological agent is. In this section, the term biological agent means any microorganism, including bacteria, viruses like the flu virus, fungi, rickettsia, or protozoa, pathogen or infectious substance, and any naturally occurring bioengineered or synthesized component of any such microorganism, pathogen or infectious substance, whatever its origin or method of production, like the re-engineered, recombined flu virus, that is capable of causing death, disease, or other biological malfunction in a human, an animal, a plant, or another living organism. Deterioration of food, water, equipment, supplies, or materials of any kind, or deleterious alteration of the environment. So the government just gave its permission to kill, disease, or make to malfunction the human, animal, plant, or other living organism's body. They've given their permission to deteriorate our food, water, equipment, supplies, and materials of any kind, and they've given their permission to alter our environment. This is your government. And these are the same people who want to vaccinate you, and passing laws to force vaccinate you and your children. Under Section 1519, labeled Lethal Binary Chemical Munitions, and under Paragraph A, it states, notwithstanding any other provision of law, none of the funds authorized to be appropriated by this or any other act shall be used for the purpose of production of lethal binary chemical munitions, unless the President certifies to Congress that the production of such munitions is essential to the national interest, and submits a full report thereon to the President of the Senate, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives as far in advance of the production of such munitions as is practicable. And what is the definition of lethal binary chemical munitions? Simply, they are 1. Any toxic chemical, solid, liquid, or gas, which, through its chemical properties, is intended to be used to produce injury or death to human beings. Or 2. Any unique device, instrument, apparatus, or contrivance, including any components or accessories thereof, intended to be used to disperse or otherwise disseminate any such toxic chemical. Again, your government is allowing itself to harm you with any toxic chemical, solid, liquid, or gas, dispersed from any device, instrument, apparatus, etc. And these are the people that we are hoping are protecting us from vaccination, injury, infection, and death. Moving on to Section 1515, listed as suspension of presidential authorization, we read that after November 19th, 1969, the operation of this chapter or any portion thereof may be suspended by the President during the period of any war declared by Congress and during the period of any national emergency declared by Congress or by the President. Note here that a national emergency was certainly declared for the so-called swine flu outbreak of 2009. And that state of emergency has not, to this date, been relieved. And then there's Title 18, Part 1, Under Chapter 113B, we come to terrorism. Under Section 2332H, titled Radiological Dispersal Devices, we find out that the government can in fact irradiate us anytime it wants to. Under Paragraph A, Section 1, it states that in general, except as provided in Paragraph 2, it shall be unlawful for any person to knowingly produce, construct, otherwise acquire, transfer, directly or indirectly, receive, possess, import, export, or use, or possess, and threaten to use, A, any weapon that is designed or intended to release radiation or radioactivity at a level dangerous to human life, or B, any device or other object that is capable of or designed or intended to endanger human life through the release of radiation or radioactivity. Once again, that sounds fantastic. But in Part 2, it states, exception. This subsection does not apply with respect to A, conduct by or under the authority of the United States or any department or agency thereof, or conduct pursuant to the terms of a contract with the United States or any department or agency thereof. One example of this would be the Department of Transportation and the Department of Homeland Security now using full-body radiation scanners in airports, requiring you to pass through these DNA-destroying machines, which provably cause cancer, with the full protection of the U.S. government under Title 18. Again, the public has no recourse against this type of action taken by your supposedly representative government, especially under a national emergency. Now, to be perfectly clear, the United States federal government has given itself permission to commit terrorist acts upon not only the American people, but against the entirety of the population of this planet, human, animal, and other. It is also giving its permission to any person, entity, or private or public corporation to use what the U.S. Code defines as terrorism through their purposeful release of radiation or of radiological materials under government contract. To be clear, this is legalized terrorism. Do you understand? The U.S. government is legally a self-proclaimed terrorist by its own law of admission in Title 18 of the U.S. Code.
Now, I want you to truly grasp what is being said here in these U.S. codes. That I'm not kidding. I mean, this is literally saying that thanks to the exception clauses that we put in our law, which essentially goes throughout the entire structure, because again, if you declare a national emergency, you're literally suspending the Constitution, suspending the law. Out of necessity, declaring a war again on the whatever the emergency is against, and therefore suspending all the laws and forcing something to happen. Thus, could technically a forced vaccination or forced anything happen? Absolutely. All you have to do is declare an emergency, and thus you have essentially martial law. We are. How do I tell you this? We've been in a declaration of an emergency since essentially the Civil War. The Civil War was not a war. The Civil War was a declaration of emergency. All right, it was number 1 by Lincoln. Okay, it was not a legitimate war because there was no legitimate Congress. The Congress had broken, and therefore it was done. Kaput. Absolutely 100% illegitimate when those states broke off from that Congress, the separatist states, the quote-unquote Confederacy. Again, Confederacy, combination, and conspiracy are all the same words, folks. Look it up. Confederacy, conspiracy, and combination. All the same concept, all the same words. So, the Civil War, as they call it, was not a war or anything legitimate between nations because, of course, the United States never recognized the quote-unquote Confederacy as a nation, even though they did everything correctly and were required by the law of nations to do so. They never gave the South, the southern states, the respect of a nation. Thus, they treated them horribly. Right? Without that international law, the nation, the union, as they called it, just absolutely, utterly just kicked their asses and had no recourse to follow any type of humanitarian, as they call it, law. It was, you have the Lieber Code that was established, which explains the rules of an occupied nation, an occupied country, which is every state. The states had to create new constitutions after the 1860s and agree to the notion that all the lands, the public lands, were forfeited to the United States. I mean, the whole thing is such a fascinating history. But I'm getting off track. We'll go over that sometime, and where the government explains that the Civil War never actually ended, you fools. That no treaty was actually signed, that the last state to be wrangled in and suffocated was Texas, of course. If you read the actual documents, it pretty much says, Texas, if you ever get out of line again, if you ever try to secede, which means essentially form a conspiracy to take the public lands of the United States, we're going to come in and we're going to kick your ass. I'm sorry, Texas. You might think you're tough. You might think you have independence in some weird way, but no, that's just not how it works, because the new constitutions, we've bound ourselves in a way that it wasn't before the Civil War. Before, it was the states that would protect each other. Now, the United States, this monster has been created as the protector, just like the king, the kingdom that we supposedly declared independence from. So we've gotten ourselves again right back into the same saddle that we were in before the Revolutionary War, before the Declaration of Independence. And like I said, if you look at the Declaration of Independence and you replace the word king with president, or the word England with the word United States, the district, Washington, D.C., the seat of government, well, you're going to find that the crimes of the United States are vastly worse than anything that the king did, including, of course, forcing everyone to use United States currency, and including the notion of a standing army. A standing frickin' army in peacetime, as we discussed last week. Now, what's so fascinating about these laws that we just read, again, that's in my documentary, free on YouTube, free for anybody that wants to watch it any time, Lethal Injection, the story of vaccination. I will tell you this: when I started reading the Constitution, a decade ago, when I actually said I better read this thing, I've heard about it, we all talk about it, but nobody's ever read the thing, because if you read it, you're going to be shocked to find that what it actually says is except, or any of the quote-unquote exception clauses. We're bound in this way, except or unless. Go read it. Will not take, your land, your property, unless you're convicted of a felony. Well, guess what? The birth certificate is the same thing as a felony. You're a felon by birth into the nation. It's hard to explain that. It's in my book, but it's all explained in there. It's very difficult to accept, but true nonetheless. So this is why you're informed on. Why does anybody inform on anybody? Because you're a criminal. You're informing on a criminal act. So again, because you're put into this system by your parents, or same that you have done to your children, and this is what I want to talk about next, because this is very important to another subject I didn't get to cover in a previous show in any detail, is this notion of voluntarism. This notion that we have put ourselves into this situation. We've put our children into this situation, and we continue to do so in a very, very, very disturbing cultural way. We think it's somehow normal to register our children, just as Caesar in the Bible wanted to tax or register every child, every man. Just as the Pope in his Unum Sanctum wishes to see every man under the heel and boot of the Pope, or whatever shoe he wears in his fish hat, under his fish hat costume, his Dogan get-up. Right? So we're talking about a bunch of people who have been tricked, who have been defeated so utterly, not only in their conceptualization of language, which we've certainly talked about, the dog Latin, right? The Latin that we call English, that only the courts really know what you're saying when you say it. You think you're saying one thing, but you're actually saying the other, because there's the metaphoric version and the real, or the literal version. We're all literalists, having no idea how to speak beautifully, how to speak poetically, how to speak metaphorically, or how to speak legally. So we go to court, we speak English. Well, what's the judge hearing? Well, Latin. The Latin meaning of English words. What is dog Latin? Dog Latin is the English grammatical, or the Latin grammatical set spoken in English. That's our problem. We're saying things, we're saying the opposite almost every time we say it. We're caught in this causal loop, if you will, the cause and effect doctrine, if you will, of constantly abandoning our children to the state, making the state its ward, and then the state grants us the privilege, if you will, the right, which there are no rights in nature, to be the guardians, not parental rights, just guardianship rights. The big difference between paternal rights, ultimate rights, and or natural rights, as they call them. Again, we're talking about negative rights. These are strictly duty-bound rights. In other words, all men have the duty to recognize the fact that you have the paternal a property or right over your children, and that's the only thing you have as far as quote-unquote property in the natural sense. There's no such thing as property in nature. That's a man-made concept. I can't tell you how important it is to understand this. We covered this in the previous show, but what we didn't get to cover is the voluntary aspect of this, which were the words confirmation and ratification. These are two of the most important words in law. You have the confirmation process in the Catholic and other churches, denominations. You have confirmation there. You also have confirmation or ratification of laws. The United States itself was, and states are actually ratified by the president and by the vote of the people. Keep in mind that when a state is created, or when the states were created, they were created by the signature of the president. They were a petition to create a state. It's not like a bunch of people just got together and said, hey, we're California. No. Go read where the states are created. You're going to find, first of all, the documents that are called, if I can just remember the word, the enabling acts. Those enabling acts are, of course, federal enabling acts, because the federal government has to approve the public lands to be put into a state. Because remember, the Civil War never ended. The Union, the United States as a standing army, foreign to all other states, never gave up its right to be in that position. There was never a peace treaty, in other words. See, this is the part of history they don't teach you. So, through the enabling acts, the states, i.e. the people of the that are creating the state, the private landholders that are creating the state means people, are getting permission, and the president signs and the state is created. That's no longer, how do I say this? It's not the same as it was before the Civil War. So anyway, we'll get into that heavier sometime, but I want to make sure that we understand that the notion of anything mandatory, such as mandatory vaccines for you or your children, will come not because it means every man has to get vaccinated, but because every person has to get vaccinated. You say, well, they're the same thing. No, one is a man, one is a straw man. A man of no substance, a person, a status in society. It's a vessel, a commercial vessel. As long as you are acting as a citizenship of the United States, a commercial vessel, a denizen, one who is in nativity, one who calls the state or the district as their father, one who bears the arms of the United States, which is the seal and flag of the United States, instead of the arms of their family, their bloodline, their own family, like the private people do. Well then, as long as you're operating in someone else's property, which is the status granted by the United States, just like the little car on the Monopoly board, just like any false thing, right? You don't own your free internet account. You don't own your YouTube avatar or your Yahoo avatar, your Google Mail and all that. You don't own that. You should know this, right? You're using another's property. They're offering it to you for free. They're giving you benefits. They're selling you, taking all your information. If you actually read your Google contract, your Microsoft end user agreement, you would be freaking shocked what you have voluntarily given up to these companies. They have the right to go into your computer because you've signed their agreements, you're using their property, and you've agreed to their terms without even reading them. You're a volunteer. Do you understand? You're volunteering for that. You do not need to know what's happening. You do not need to know that they're going and doing this. All you need to do is agree to it. You need to agree to that external law. Those external rules. You need to contract. That's all that needs to happen. Did you ever sign a contract? No, you clicked a frickin' button. I agree to this end user agreement. I agree. Thank you very much. May I have another? Here, why don't you stick that right in my ass and twist, because that's what they're doing. They're getting you to volunteer for something that you have no idea what you're volunteering for. That is citizenship. Now, why I can't make this clear, why people just refuse to understand or try to understand or believe, I know why. It's because you call yourself an anarchist. You call yourself a volunteerist. You say I'm part of the non-aggression principle. It's bullshit. It's a lie. There's no non-aggression in nature. Tell me, what species in nature is non-aggressive? Tell me. Right? Is it a Disney character you love? Is that what it is? The whole thing's bullshit. You're a volunteer whether you like it or not. And guess what? You don't get to define terms here. You don't get to say what volunteerism is. Now, let me give you an example of volunteerism just so we can understand that volunteerism can be just as tyrannical as any other system out there. All right? What happens when you join the military? We have a volunteer military. You can't deny that. You have the choice. You can join the military, you cannot join the military, right? There's no getting around that notion. It's a word that they define, they put on there. But once you join, once you've become that status, that flattering title of either officer or soldier or private or whatever it is that you've taken upon your person, which is again property of the United States, whatever status you have taken in the military, you've signed an agreement and you've agreed tacitly to follow the entirety of the military code of justice. You've absolutely 100% agreed voluntarily to join something and therefore follow the rules by using the vessel or the flattering title of that organization, that corporation. That is volunteerism. Now, what happens when you get into the military? Suddenly you're being bossed around. You could be thrown in jail for doing the stupidest of things. You have to follow orders. You have no say in any matter. You're no longer able to pull anything of citizenship or even natural law into you're under the uniform code of military justice. You no longer have these quote-unquote rights that you whine about at all times, even though you have no idea what they are, nor that they don't really exist in nature. Remember, we're talking about negative rights, as they call them, which just means that all other men, including you, have a duty not to fuck with other people. That's all it means. See, in nature, to have a right means that all other people have a duty. In legalism, to declare a positive right, I'm gay, therefore I'm special. I'm a woman, therefore I'm special. I get rights because I'm a woman. I get rights because I'm black. I get rights because I'm white. I get rights. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. You're saying that I get rights and that everyone else has a legal duty to follow that. Even if it's against your religion, even if it's against your moral compass, even if it's against the law, for everyone else to do, you have the right to do it, and I have the duty now to respect that quote-unquote artificially created right. This is why you can't create rights in nature. You can't just automatically, somehow, magically create a right in nature. They're self-evident. They're set. I don't have the right to harm you or your lands that you've settled for yourself. I don't have the right to do anything because there are no positive rights. I can't just declare a right because I'm not God. That's why they call them God-given rights. So you go and you want a right. Okay, well, the only way you can do that is legally. That's why this is why governments are created in the first place, to go against, to be anarchical, lawless, to give someone license to break the frickin' law, the law of nature. That's the only purpose for the legal law, folks. There's no reason to create any law above the law of nature. But in order to get your law, your anti-God, anti-nature, anti-Christ law, which we call the legal system, to be able to control others, you must get them to voluntarily choose to be affected by that status. So that, because remember, the person, the status is what the law of man applies to. It does not apply to man. It applies to the man who's foolish enough to become surety for another. The Bible is very clear. Those who choose to become surety for another will smart for it. In other words, they'll be put in pain for it. You don't understand what that means? Well, you better go to Title 42, Section 1981. Title 42, Section 1981 of the U.S. Code. It'll explain what that means. You have the right to be punished as a citizen, not as a man. As a man in surety for citizenship, as someone who's using the status, the vessel of the United States, you have the absolute 100% right and therefore duty to become the insurance policy for that status. You, as the man, will be punished, put in pain, taxed, licensed, and extorted. The correct word is exacted from. Because you have taken the property of another and you are using it. These are your rights. They're not your rights. They're the rights of the person that you're standing as surety for. That means you're in a performance debt. Citizenship is not a monetary debt. It is a performance debt. It is a contractually based performance debt. You must perform according to the law that applies to the vessel you are using in commerce. It's voluntary. There is no gun pointed at your head. There is no banker forcing you to be in debt. There is no Jew. There is nothing causing you to do anything. It's all voluntary. Now, I will say there is a politician, there's a police officer, and there's everybody else within the legal system forcing you to follow the legal law because you have voluntarily contracted, just like a military officer or a military grunt, a peon, a pawn. You have agreed to be under that law, under that Uniform Code of Military Justice, just like you did when you became a citizen and you said, I'm under the U.S. Code and all laws that apply to the status. It's voluntary. No one's forcing you to stay in that system. But if you do stay in that system, then you voluntarily agree to all the stipulations, all the rules, all the laws. I'm so freaking sick of hearing how you're forced to do this and how the police are beating you. Oh, all these tragic stories. You volunteered. Now let me prove this. Now I don't want you to think, hey, oh Clint, he's got an opinion over there in the Red Pill Sunday School. He's a dick. He's mean. You know, I'm gonna read to you out of my book. Well, these are direct copies of the dictionaries. Right? W.C. Anders' 1889 dictionary, Bouvier's 1856. What else? Black's Law dictionaries, various, 4th edition usually. Okay, these are coming from primary and secondary sources used in courts. Okay, these are the opinions of the court for the most part. I don't want you to think this is coming from me. This is just me understanding how the law works. When I tell you something, I'm telling you something from their point of view, not from mine. You think I'm pro any of this? You think I'm for any of this shit? No. I discovered how it works. I'm trying to explain to you how it works, and I'm trying to tell you that until you admit that this is voluntary, until you admit that you've been utterly defeated by trickery, by prestigiousness, by false titles, by all the benefits and wealth and money and all this stuff has defeated you and kept you volunteering into this system. And by the way, volunteerism is yet again, it's called the doctrine of master and servant. That is what volunteerism is defined as. The doctrine of master and servant. You volunteer to be the servant. It is also called in the U.S. Constitution voluntary servitude, which is perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. Yes, they outlawed the right of individual men to hold slaves, or individual citizens. They nationalized slavery. They said all citizens, all public citizens that are not landholders, will become citizens of the United States. In other words, voluntary slavery, voluntary servitude. That's the story of the 13th Amendment. Because what does it say? It says simply that involuntary slavery and involuntary servitude are now outlawed, except... Oh, I missed that word. What do you mean except? Except, or unless, someone is convicted for a crime. Oh, well, gosh, that's a clause that just created the entire private prison system. That's why we have so many prisoners. If you're convicted of a crime, then voluntary servitude and voluntary slavery are legal. That's what it actually says. It doesn't, there's no fine print. But you read it. You can't read it any other way if you consider everything about it. Just like the Second Amendment. Just like anything else out there that we've been conditioned to believe it means something other than it does. Well, I have the right to happiness and property and, except unless, remember, citizenship is a burden upon the state. It's a criminal. It's a felony. See, you think you know what the word felony means. That's the problem. Felony doesn't just mean you're a frickin' murderer. No, you're just a burden on the state. Your parents abandoned you, just like you abandoned your children. And this is what I'm trying to get across here to you, is the process of volunteerism, because it's not what you think. You think that at some point you must say, I volunteer, I want to be a citizen, I'll sign, give me, No, that's not how volunteerism works. You grow into it. You accept what has happened. I'm going to read this to you now. This is what we call confirmation. A contract, this is confirmation, a contract by which that which was avoidable or voidable is made firm and unavoidable. How does that happen? You become 18 and you say, well, all the things I've done until the age of this consenting expression I accept. I am Clint Richardson. I do have a social security number. I do have that bank account. I do sign in that name. I have admixed my good Christian name, my innocence, with the evil of the legal system through the surname, the event name, the agnomen, not the cognomen, the family name, but the agnomen, the name created at the birth event. Agnomen means an event name, a name created by an event. Okay, so at the age of 18, you are literally accepting everything that was done on your behalf by your parents, who foolishly and ignorantly have no idea what they were doing when they abandoned you, registered you for school in that surname, in that legal identity, did everything they could to help you conform and confirm this and ratify, express this false identity, this legal identity, this anti-nature, anti-God identity. And all the flattering titles, which the Bible says do not respect, that go with it. You are taking upon yourself that which was voidable up until the point you were 18, or whatever the age is in your country, of consent, and you are saying, yes, I accept that which is voidable. I can throw it away. I can say I didn't do that. That I wasn't old enough to have any contract forced upon me. I'm pleading the Baby Act. I was not there. But you take it and you run with it. You get a job. You go to school, college. You continue getting credit in the name of this that belongs to another. Okay? That is volunteerism. You cannot sit here and say that is not volunteerism. I'm sorry. It's foolish to you can call it other things if you want to, but the way the government defines that is volunteerism, i.e. confirmation, taking that which is voidable, making it unavoidable. Why is it unavoidable now? Well, now you have debts. Now Now you've taken this whole monster of a thing upon you, and the only way to get out of it is to discharge it. So until you do so, until you literally kill the straw man, make it die, so that you may live and have spiritual life, because right now you're spiritually dead according to the law. You're considered spiritually dead, which is why you have no right or access to the natural law, God's law, the Bible, because you've accepted this artificial person, and the law of persons is purely legal, which means anti-God. You have no natural rights. Your creator is government, not God. You're not an act of God, nor are you acting as an act of God. Your course has been changed. You no longer worship nature. You want to defeat it, put a price on it, purchase it. You no longer consider it priceless. You're in the legal system. You're in and under the god of mammon. You cannot have two gods, which means literally means, or metaphorically means, you cannot have two systems of law that are opposed to each other. You cannot consider something as priceless in nature and also put a price on it in mammon. It just can't do it. This is self-evident truth. This is why it's so beautiful when you do understand the self-evident nature of this, what they call the Word of God, which simply means law. Two opposing laws. Remember, you don't choose your God, folks. You choose your law. The law you follow chooses your God. And the reason that's important is not a religious concept. It's important because then government knows whether it can control you or not. The only way government can control you is if you voluntarily use its property, its name, its title, its status, its number, its mark. Okay? If you choose the God of nature, you have none of those things. The Bible tells you none of those things can apply to you if you're to follow me. Okay? Again, get rid of the religious shit. Focus on what it's the meaning. It's law. It's telling you to keep your name clean and innocent. Keep all the fiction away from you. And do so religiously. Act religiously, just like you religiously drink coffee every day, just like you religiously follow the legal law, religiously follow the natural law. Do not allow anything from legalism, from artificialness, to taint your status under God, if you will, your natural self. And remember, that is what birth is. It is a corruption of blood. That is what the person stands for. A person has no blood. It's a fiction. It's a status. Therefore, by acting in person, your own blood is corrected. You've taken the arms, the bloodline of the United States, which is no blood at all, and you've said, I am a voluntary servant. That's how it works, folks. This is not my opinion. I want you to, again, clear this up. I'm going to keep reading here. When a contract has been entered into by a stranger without authority, he in whose name it has been made may, by his own act, confirm it. Or, if the contract be made by the party himself in an informal and voidable manner, he may in a more formal manner confirm and render it valid. And in that event, it will take effect, as between the parties, from the original making. What's that saying again? This is all done without your consent, this is all done by your parents, because your parents are ignorant. You've been doing it to your children because you are ignorant. You have no idea what you're subjecting your children to. But you've sent them to public school. You've sat them in front of the television. You've made all of this stuff seem normal. Slavery seems fucking perfectly normal. And so when they're 18, when we turn 18, we confirm it. We continue acting in everything you've set up. Your children will continue to act as what you set them up into. The person, the status, the voluntary servitude. Okay, they're voluntarily confirming the contract by continuing to act in the contractual relationship, which we call citizenship. To make a valid confirmation, the party must be apprised of his rights, and where there has been a fraud in the transaction, he must be aware of it and intend to confirm his contract. Now, it is not up to government to make you aware of anything. They publish the law. Once the law is published, and this is why you are published, once the law is published, it's your responsibility to know the law, just as when you signed the end-user agreement for Google, for Microsoft, it is your responsibility to know exactly what's in there before you voluntarily click fricking yes. Give it to me, baby. Same thing applies here. They're not going to tell you it's fraud. You gotta... You inherently know there's something wrong. Everybody knows there's something freaking wrong going on. The question is, are you going to... I mean, again, I say this... I can't say this with a straight face. We are all in this situation together. We're following a law that we do not know. We do not know the law. There's no one out there listening that can tell me, yeah, I know U.S. code. Just give me a code and a number and I'll tell you what the law is. No. You don't even have a clue what the law is. And yet you've confirmed, you've ratified it by acting in something that is bound to follow that law. Remember the maxim of law. Again, you don't have a choice what the maxims of law are. When you're in the property of another, you go by what they say the maxims of law are, what your administrator says, the administrator of your person, which is the judge. The maxim of law says it is the same exact thing to be bound by the law as it is to know the law. To be bound by the law and to know the law are the same thing. What does that mean? That means if you voluntarily confirm and continue acting in the person, you voluntarily, therefore, accept the law of persons. You are bound by the law because you're acting as in that property. That is the same as knowing the law. It is your duty to know the law. They're not going to, they have no obligation to tell you anything because they have published everything for your convenience. This is how I have learned because it's all there. It's all out there for you. This is why I wrote this book. And again, you can go to strawmanstory.info. Strawmanstory.info. Download it for free. If you want a printed copy, there's instructions there how to get it. But it's free, folks. You think I spent years and years of my life doing this for fun or because I wanted to make some kind of profit, which I do not make, by the way? I don't know what to say. We have to admit our defeat. We have to admit to our volunteerism. We have to admit to our own actions. We have to admit what we've done to our children, what our parents did to us. And most of all, after all that, we have to forgive. Right? We have to forgive. We have to say, okay, that's the system that was set up. We fell for it. It was a trick. Okay, forgiveness, absolute forgiveness. I discharge the debt. I'm no longer volunteer. I'm going to go along in my own way. I'm going to be a peaceful sojourner. You know, whatever you do from that point, you become a private citizen, you do this, you do that, you join a monastery, whatever. The point is, you cannot lie to yourself any longer and claim that you're not voluntarily a citizen of the United States. Now, I'm gonna put on the speed here because we're gonna run out of time yet again. From the original making, the party must be appraised of his rights, etc., etc., etc. The law is published. If you don't understand that, I don't know what to tell you. Proper. Lord Coke defines a confirmation of an estate to be a conveyance of an estate or right in S, whereby a voidable estate is made sure and unavoidable, where a particular estate is increased. That's talking about, again, your real estate process. We've lost that art, so I won't even get into that. The proper technical words of confirmation are ratify and confirm. And so we're going to go to ratify after this, because this gives you an even more clear understanding of what actually happens in the confirmation process. A confirmation does not strengthen a void estate. If it's built on fraud, folks, which all citizenships are, you can void it discharge it, get out of it. This is voluntary, remember. When the other maxim of law that's so important is that if you knowingly participate in a fraud and benefit from that fraud, you cannot call it fraud. It is your duty to quit. Your duty to quit claiming the status, getting the benefits, i.e. consumer protections and insurances and all that shit. Okay, it is your duty to stop acting in fraud once you learn. You cannot sit here and say I'm an anarchist. I'm a volunteerist. No, you can't do that. You have to quit. You can't just suddenly pretend to be something else. You're in a contractual obligation. That's unavoidable until you quit. For confirmation, confirmation may make avoidable or defeasible estate good. The canon law agrees with this rule. Okay, so that's right up to the Vatican. And also they call canons, the Bar Association also goes by canons, not rules. The canon law agrees. An infant is said. Now listen to this carefully, folks, because this is the important part. An infant, that is anyone up to the age of consent. An infant is said to confirm his acts performed during infancy when, after coming to full age, he expressly approves of them or does acts, ACTS, from which such confirmation may be implied. What happens when you continue using the legal name, continue using the bank account, continue signing in the legal name, continue using the Social Security, the driver's license, all of the benefits, all of the marks and signs and symbols that expressly say, I am a citizenship of the United States? You confirm them as someone who reaches the age of consent. Okay, whether it's expressly or by implication or tacitly, in other words, by implication without words, doesn't matter. Okay, tacit just means the right to be silent, right? The right to be silent. Silence does not mean that you don't talk, by the way. It just means that you don't answer certain questions, etc., etc., etc. Implied but not expressed. Consent by silence or not interposing an objection. A tacit surrender of a part of our natural rights, in other words. So when you are silent, you say nothing, you are consenting. Okay, this is the confusion. The right to be silent does not mean that you are silent when you're supposed to speak. Okay, because if you are silent when you're supposed to speak, and the maxims of law agree with this, no judge will ever disagree with what I'm saying, you're guilty of consent. You are consenting to, and with citizenship, you're, as it says in Webster's 1828, a tacit surrender of a part of our natural rights. Let's see. So let's go to the ratification here, because this is so important. Again, reaffirming what we just read in confirmation. Ratification is confirmation, approbation of a contract. Ratification. Remember, the states drew up their plans, and it was ratified by the United States, by the president. Ratihibito, confirmation, agreement, consent, approbation of a contract. So ratification. Now, I want you to listen carefully here, folks. In a broad sense, ratification is the confirmation of a previous act done by either the party himself or by another. Confirmation of a voidable act. Remember, everything's voidable. The whole citizen is voidable until this ratification process where you continue in the person. The affirmance by a person of a prior act which did not bind him, no child is bound by any contract, but which was done or professed done on his account, which is what your parents do and what you do to your children, whereby the act as to some or all persons is given effect as if originally authorized by him. Once you use the name, you continue doing it, you're going back to the beginning. You have to. It's necessary. You're saying that what happened in my childhood, I consent to. All the abuse, all the horrible things that happened, all the public education, all the public this, that, and the other, all the brainwashing, you're accepting. You're saying, yes, I accept it all. You can't claim fraud. If you do claim fraud, you have to quit for that fraud to be acceptable. The adoption by one as binding upon himself of an act done in such relations that he may claim it is as done for his benefit. That's what you're doing this. You think you're doing this for the benefit of your children. Your parents thought the same thing. It's foolery. It's trickery. Upon himself of an act done in such relations that he may claim it as done for his benefit, although done under such circumstances as would not bind him except for his subsequent assent. You see, there's always the exception clause. Of course it's fraud. There's no doubt government knows it's fraud, but nothing is fraud until it's called fraud. The whole government is set up on fraud. Don't be a fool. Don't call something fraud when you're participating in the fraud and benefiting from it. It's not an excuse until you opt out, until you say no more. You can't use fraud as an excuse. You are the fraud. Anything artificial is fraud. A person, a United States citizen, a military officer, a president, a pope, it's all fraud. It's fake. It's not real. But it's legitimate as long as you accept it. And you confirm and ratify it by your actions. Or your inactions. Doesn't matter. See, that's the beautiful thing about this. Whether you act or don't act, you're still confirming and ratifying. In the law of principal and agent, which we've talked a lot about on my previous show, remember, United States is the principal, the person is the agent, and states are third parties to the agent and the principal. Remember, the United States is a foreign country, a foreign corporation to the states as corporations. You are an agent acting in between. Through the status, through the person. In the law of principal and agent, the adoption and confirmation by one person with knowledge of all material facts, and knowledge just means that you have the access to the knowledge, doesn't mean you're not required to know it. You're not required to actually, know the entire end user agreement. You only have to confirm it, ratify it, say yes. Of an act or contract performer entered into in his behalf by another who at the time assumed without authority to act as his agent. The essence of ratification by principle of an act of agent is manifestation of mental determination by principle to affirm the act. In other words, the United States says, what are you talking about? You can't say you're not a citizen when you're acting. You appeared in my court as Clint Richardson. You can't say, therefore, that you're not Clint Richardson. You've already committed to the act. Your mental determination was established. And again, not my opinion. I don't support this. This is how it works. If you are foolish enough to deny how it works because you don't like the way I'm telling it, you don't like to hear the truth, well, there's no helping you. You again, admit your defeat. Admit your conditioning. Come out of her. Come out of this fictional realm of man's law and re-embrace, be reborn into nature. It's all it is, man. It's all the Bible's telling you. Do not let these things affect your name. Do not accept titles. Do not give oaths. Right? Your promise to God is your oath to your fellow man. Your promise to God is your vow of marriage. You don't give a vow to the state. You give a vow to God. That's the difference between a vow and an oath. An oath is a contract. A vow means you have a natural law obligation to another. And so this is where I could go on. To ratify means to approve and sanction. In other words, to say, okay, you can punish me. Right? To make valid, to confirm. The word adopt should not be used in this case. Ratify is a different concept in law. And I could go on and on and on. Again, this is in my book. It's page look it up yourself and study it. Page 581. Download the document. What I really want to get across here today, though, I've talked about this before. I've been disagreed by people. People don't think that this is an accurate statement, but here's what I believe. I believe that I and you and just about everybody out there listening, whether you understand this stuff, whether you accept it or don't accept it, and whether you have a strong desire to get out of it, I think we are too tainted. I think we have been so utterly corrupted by technology, by fiction, by the modern conveniences of life, false life, a life not worshiping the very nature and source of our life, that which sustains us, nature, God, right? Our courses have been so far set off of serving or worshiping or living for what sustains us, protecting it, that I honestly think that to use that a quotation that I believe that children are our future. Oh God, at one time I couldn't stand when people said that, but in this case I think it's an accurate thing to say. Why do I think that? I used to think that because maybe you could steer your children to the correct course, but now I realize it's us that are actually the causal agents in our children's future, in our children's confirmation process. We are the ones that are forcing our children into these artificial wombs, these matrices. We're giving them the birth certificate. We're creating or allowing the state to create a legal entity. We're abandoning our parental rights. We're putting them in public school. For God's sake, why would anybody put any child into public school at this point? I don't understand. You must be fucking nuts to put your child in a public school. Go sit in school. Go sit in any classroom and tell me why you have your child in a public school. To learn public education, to become public-minded, meaning slave-minded. No Bible allowed. No talk of the very foundation of our law, which is the Bible. Absolutely fucking not, because that would be private. You see, I believe children are our future. Why? Because we actually have the chance to not put them into this system, to not create or help to create by offering the vital statistics, the record of birth, to the state, by having our children out of the hospital system, the fricking delivery room, delivery meaning abandonment, to not act like slaves anymore. I believe that we are our children's future, that their future depends on us not submitting them to voluntary servitude and then not teaching them that it's voidable, that at the age of consent they can say no. No, I'm no longer going to continue as this legal identity because it never applied to me in the first place. It was all fiction until the point I made it real by the confirmation and ratification process we just explained. We, as parents, and I'm very sad that I'm not one, but I've sacrificed my life so that you fucking might actually take charge and do something about this. Stop this entire system of public slavery that was created by the 14th Amendment, by the Civil War, where all men became slaves who were citizens, public pawns, peons, black or white, doesn't matter. You're all equal slaves. You see, we have the power to not put our children into these things. Or, if we've already fallen for the trickery, we have the power to stop. Okay? We have the power to say, okay, no more. Okay, whatever I've signed is now void. It applies to the baby. Look up the Pleading the Baby or Plead the Baby Act. It's all void. It cannot be applied to the baby, to the infant. It can be applied to you because you've made an obligation. You got to cancel those obligations. You got to. The only way we can literally save our children from the same destitute debt slavery, performance debt slavery that we have, is to not voluntarily subject our children by abandoning them to the state into this matrix, into this birth certificate process. If you don't understand why I'm using the word matrix, listen to last week's show. That's my opinion. That's what I've come to believe, because we're already in it. We've already ratified and confirmed. We're so far into the fiction, into the matrix, that whether we realize it or not, we've come to love it. We've come to, even though we realize what it is, it's so hard for us to even imagine what it is to go back to nature, to go back and have a leap of faith, walk in the path of Christ, walk in the path of the natural law, which is a metaphor for Christ. Okay, we're too far gone. But our children, we decide what is the fate of our children. And at the age of 18, that is the point where they can make their own decision. At that point, they have the quote-unquote right to become citizens of the United States. Why are we helping them along? Why are we doing the government's dirty work for them? Why are we sending them to conditioning centers to force them to become slaves to this legal system, to mammon? Why are we doing that? Why are we allowing this to happen? I don't know, but I'm going to say it again. You probably don't have a chance. I probably don't have a chance of actually getting out. But what I do have is a duty, the highest duty possible to my child. You have the highest natural duty under God to your child to teach him well, to steer him in the right direction, to fill his mind not with Disney and nonsense, but with the very, very knowledge of law. And that is where we stand today. There's one thing that will save us. It's not going to be our children. It's going to be us, because we're going to be the ones that direct our children out of the very, very wrong course that we have all been led into. And that is my final word on the subject. I'm going to keep trying and figure out a way to allow us to possibly raise our children in an environment that we're not influenced by this. But the first step it's all on you. It's all on you, because you're all volunteers. Okay, it's your choice to continue this charade, to follow and induce your child into the legal adversarial system, this satanic world that's been created. That is on you. And that's what else can I say? I again, go read these words that I've arranged in a way that you can see what the confirmation process is. That it is, in fact, you doing all of this to your child until the point where you've conditioned him so bad that he just accepts his slave status, his voluntary servitude. And with that, I thank you for listening to UCY.TV today. We'll see you next week, eh?
Now, my grandmother was a wonderful person. She taught me how to play the game Monopoly. She understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. And eventually, every time, she would take my last dollar, and I would quit in utter defeat. And then she would always say the same thing to me. She'd look at me and she'd say, "One day, you'll learn to play the game." One summer, I played Monopoly with a neighbor almost every day, all day long. We'd play Monopoly for hours. And that summer, I learned to play the game. I came to understand the only way to win is to make a total commitment to acquisition. I came to understand that money and possessions, that's the way that you keep score. And by the end of that summer, I was more ruthless than my grandmother. I was ready to bend the rules if I had to win that game. And I sat down with her to play that fall. I took everything she had. I destroyed her financially and psychologically. I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. And then she had one more thing to teach me. Then she said, "Now it all goes back in the box. All those houses and hotels, all the railroads and utility companies, all that property and all that wonderful money, Now it all goes back in the box. I didn't want it to go back in the box. No, she said. None of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while. But it was around a long time before you sat down at the board. And it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go. But it all goes back in the box. Houses and cars. Titles and clothes. Filled barns, bulging portfolios, even your body. Because the fact is that everything I clutch and consume and hoard is going to go back in the box, and I'm going to lose it all. That's not much of an ROI on that. You have to ask yourself, when you finally get the ultimate promotion, when you've made the ultimate purchase, when you buy the ultimate home, when you have stored up financial security and climbed the ladder of success to the highest rung you can possibly climb it, and the thrill wears off, and it will wear off, then what? How far do you have to walk down that road before you see where it leads? Surely you understand. It'll never be enough. So you have to ask yourself the question, what matters?